So when will we ever learn? I mean, what's the answer in your keynote? How do we break this? I feel like we're on repeat. The stuff that the thought leaders of today are talking about is the same stuff they were talking about 30 years ago. I still feel like I'm trying to figure out what the ROI of culture is because people need to be convinced. I mean, how do we get over this confusion about the way up?
Well, there's a couple things that I do. One is I think shaming is incredibly powerful.
Shame on you,
what I
listener.
do is I tell stories that are so awful and embarrassing and terrible that everybody does. So I tell a story and the audience is thinking, what kind of a jerk? That's me. I do that. I do it. We don't talk about it. These are these, sacred cows that we think are just perfect, wonderful things that we do every day. And I tell leaders, if you're spending more than 50% of your time in your office, you're failing as a leader. And they all start thinking, wow, my calendar's so full though. And I've got those budget meetings, but yeah, I'm probably failing. So it's important. Like, again, the leaders that, and you've talked about this too, is the leaders that can't help but get out of their office and go engage the rest of the population to learn. Those lifelong learners that are not spending all their time with the executive team. They're spending some time with them and they're doing the strategy meetings, but they're usually applying what they've learned from the rest of the workforce to those meetings to make them even more powerful. Honestly, it comes down to transparency and it comes down to telling some very difficult stories. And I tell those stories in all my speeches, and people are usually laughing, but also incredibly nervous. I was giving one recently where a guy said, and I think this epitomizes one of probably 3 or 4 key categories of poor leadership. I was at a leadership summit. I give the speech and the guy says, listen, in one of my departments, I've got 10 supervisors. 9 of them are terrible. I've got 1 great supervisor. We just can't fire 9 supervisors. You have to have people there to do all the governing and make sure everybody follows the rules. And so it's going to take us forever. We're going to do the best we can to try and help them out and teach them to be better. What would you do? And I said, I'd fire the 9 supervisors. And frankly, I'm embarrassed they haven't been fired already, because the reality is if you keep those 9 supervisors, you're telling your employees you don't care about them. You're putting terrible leadership in front of employees that work hard for you every day. Fire them today. Call your HR team after this speech and say, fire the 9 people. Do it legally, but fire them immediately. And people applauded that. And it's sometimes hard to make these kinds of decisions, but the reality is great leaders fire people faster. They do, because they're protecting the rest of the workforce that deserves to be in an environment that's positive, supportive, helps them grow, where they can do their job and make an impact every day.
But John, we're like a family here. We don't fire our family members.
That's why we're not like a family. The family member is absolute trash. Netflix did a great job with that. He said, it's not a family, it's a sports team. And we're trying to win championships.
Yeah. And if you don't play well, you are off the team. Yeah. That's so true. I mean,
you might have a couple of bad games, Kriegel. You might have a couple of bad games, but you have a bad season, you're getting traded.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. What we do as culture consultants, and I mean you and me and culture partners, we coach people around getting out of the action trap and coaching to beliefs. So they need to create experiences that will lead to the right beliefs, that will get people to take the action, that'll get you the results. And at a macro level, that's what we do. The most powerful experiences are stories. It's recognition and it's feedback, which is what we're doing with our clients and what we do in keynotes. And we're trying to change beliefs about the importance of culture and the impact that it has on driving results in business. The problem is there's this idea that it's people versus profit and you got to pick a side. You're either hard or you're soft.
Yeah.
And that's not true.
It's not true. But also you're bringing up a really important point about, you said the action trap, but I think you need to describe that a little bit more. Can you give us a little bit more detail, Dr. Kriegel, on the action trap? Because this is super important to why the old ways are still the current ways.
Yeah. Well, Everyone wants results. That's the purpose of business. And all results in business come from the actions that employees take. And that's as far as most leaders go in their thinking. They stop right there. They say, okay, great. So we need to take action in order to get a result. Let's focus on action. You guys should do this. Did that get the result? No, let's try something else. And then they implement a new action and they go back and forth. That's the rat race. That's the hamster wheel of the action trap, which is that you're micromanaging activity and telling people what to do, which is what's making them feel like a cog in your wheel, as opposed to giving them the autonomy, coaching them to the right beliefs so that they will proactively come up with the actions they need to take to get the results. And that's really empowerment and culture.
So the reason that's exactly what I wanted you to say. Thank you. Because the reason why things have not changed is when you rule based on, and don't lead, when you rule based on fear, you do get, fear is powerful and short-term results do happen. Okay. I mean, fear is much more powerful than hope. Okay. It is. And it gets you to behave and it gets you to jump and to work. It doesn't get a lot of discretionary effort though. I will do my job. And by the way, that's all I will do. Right. But fear does motivate in a very negative way. And we need to remember this because we still have a lot of old supervisors, both in the white collar office world and out on the frontline workforce, that yell and scream, manage based on fear, and it gets results. It doesn't get great results. It drives turnover. It's a toxic culture, but people show up and do their job on the days when they're actually at work. So the problem is it gets just enough done that it doesn't break the cycle. And, Jessica, to your point, like, will we ever learn? Things have got to get a lot tougher. Through COVID, we thought we learned. We didn't learn anything. Nobody's out banging pots and pans, celebrating the healthcare workforce that's saving our lives every day. Those days are over. We forgot about those people, right? When it comes to the manufacturers, the people on the front line that actually made sure the food supply chain stayed intact, we've completely forgotten about them as well. Right? We're back to yelling. We're back to fear. Economy slowing down. Turnover starting to slow down a little bit in the hourly workforce. It is almost at a dead halt for the salaried workforce. They're like, last one in, first one out. I'm going to get fired. I'm not going anywhere. Right? So when we look at all of these trends, it feels like we're going right back down into the dumpster.
Okay. Yes. And isn't fear the problem that we're all struggling with on it? I mean, I have fear. I don't want to lose my job, right? I mean, that's a motivator for me. And I think every CEO, I mean, the system, fear begets fear. We're in a fear-based system, aren't we? Kind of?
Yeah, I mean, if you keep having guests like me on your podcast, you can be fired by next week. So, I mean, I think fear is relevant in this context. Yes. Fear is like is a very sort of human basic instinct, right? And it drives survival. But have we gotten to a place in our evolution where we can pause for a second and focus on building the hope, building the structure, building the people so that they will actually do more and they'll be happier and they'll be more fulfilled and they're going to get better results because they believe. And the answer is, I'm talking about the frontline workforce, but the reality is I can't get that out of my executive leadership teams that I coach, right? I can, but not all of them, because some of them will not jump to the other side and say, you know what? I've been doing it wrong. There's a better opportunity out here to motivate my teams, to have them be even more productive, to drive more revenue, more profitability, do all the right things. And it doesn't cost me any money. I've just got to reprioritize how I spend my time as an executive leader. That's a tough pill to swallow.